awesome. I'm going to ask you a personal question. You might want to shut your eyes and think about it. Where do you feel at home? What does that place look like? What does it smell like? What are the other people around you? Maybe it's changing. Okay, you can open your eyes again now. This is what I want to explore with you today. This feeling of home and what we understand about this now in a time of enormous social and environmental change. So I started to think about this a lot recently when I actually moved out of Brixton. I'd lived here for nearly 7 years. I'd set up my business here, made friends, but then the rent went up and I had to leave. And as I looked around me, I saw that there were so many other people who were far more connected to their home and their community in Brixton than I was, who were also having to leave due to rising prices. And I started to question. Initially, I'd thought, well, this is just an inevitable part of the town's economic development. But as I saw the protests happening in the streets and the banners going up demanding that the heart of Brixton not be ripped out, I started to really wonder what was going on. I thought I must have completely overestimated the importance of physical spaces to our feeling of home and our cultural identity. I realised in the whole time that I'd lived in Brixton, I never really understood what this heart of Brixton was, or what it meant to really belong in this community. I had no context with which to understand this rising conflict, and that really bothered me. So it was around this time that I was invited to a tea party in a public toilet. Now, this public toilet is in Loughborough Junction, and a few years ago you'd probably more likely find measles on the floor than you would find tea in teacups. But I was there, and now it had been turned into a pop-up space for new entrepreneurs to try out their business ideas. So quite a change. And it was at this tea party that I met a fantastic man called Michael Gross. Now, Michael Gross is the Cheltenham Poetry Prize winner whose tragic family story sparked off the 1985 Brixton riots. It was when I was listening to Michael's story that I started to think, this must be somebody who really emulates this heart of Brixton I've heard so much about. Michael's life had completely transformed Brixton, and in return, Brixton had shaped Michael. Just walking down Coldharbour Lane with Michael takes forever. People are stopping him in the street and he's like, you've got to come meet this guy. And he's like running across the street and you're chatting and sharing stories and joking. He just wants to bring everyone into his experience. So I was so surprised when Michael revealed to me that he also didn't really know what this heart of Brixton was now, or what it meant to belong here. After all, he lived in Brixton his whole life, but he felt an incredibly strong sense of home and belonging in Jamaica, where his family were from. So we realised that this feeling of home and belonging is incredibly complex. It's probably different for everybody here. And in a place that had seen such enormous social change over the past generations, it was perhaps even more complex. We decided by the end of the tea party that we wanted to explore this together. We wanted to talk to people who lived and worked down Coldharbour Lane, which is the main artery that runs from Brixton to Camberwell. We wanted to create a collection of stories from the people who'd really made this place what it is today. And we decided we were going to start in Brixton. So what I want to show you now is a tiny little snapshot of some of those initial stories that we started to collect.
I arrived in Brixton, or in England, on the 1st of September 1957.
It was cold and frost and fog.
England is a cold place. Brixton had a sense of warmth about it. The music, the food, the smells. And I can actually smell it.
Brixton Market was something to behold.
People would make parties every single weekend, and we will just sometimes go walk along the street, whether it's Ater Road or Summerlayton Road, and hear the noise and just knock on the door.
Incredible party atmosphere, blues dancers. They were, it was, sometimes I tell my children about it, they don't believe me.
The radios used to blare at the weekend.
Going through Coldharbour Lane, hearing calypso, hearing some hard dub, hearing some jungle.
And there's always all these guys around a microphone. As soon as you went for a breath, it was snatched away from you, so you had to get in there quick.
The latest phrases, the latest cultural whatever came up in the music. So you had to hear the music to know what was going on out there.
Every DJ I heard back in those days had a lyric about the police being treated badly, the homes being torn apart. These artists doing that, they're the real kind of reporters of the day, because they're expressing something within themselves that I'm not seeing in the South London press.
You're taking me back now because I'm starting to remember.
I've spoken to Linton Kwesi Johnson about it and he agrees. There's something about Brixton that gives people energy to be creative.
Brixton definitely massively influenced the music, the Basement Jaxx music.
Every time that I get the feelings to leave, it's like something keeping me back from staying Brixton. I did try very hard.
There are all these stories there, which, I think they're just going to disappear. And in 20 years' time, one would know the sort of things that were happening.
So we started interviewing people and hearing their stories, and before long we had hours of footage. People were opening up to us in ways they told us they hadn't done before, particularly with a stranger like me. And the fact that I was a stranger really was an issue because I hadn't grown up here and I hadn't experienced a lot of the social tensions the people we were talking to had. Also, people had pretty negative experiences of media types just wading in and trying to take stories out of context for their own benefit. So people were curious and they were saying, why does she care about this? Maybe she's not the right person to tell this story. And we really had to take that on board because they're absolutely right. I wasn't necessarily the right person to tell this story. Maybe Michael wasn't either. Maybe there wasn't any right one individual to tell the story of a community as broad and diverse as Brixton. But that's also not what Michael and I were trying to do. What we wanted to do was to listen to stories from people and try and understand them. And then if we could, we wanted to create some kind of platform that could communicate those stories to other people so that they could learn from them and benefit from them as well. Once people understood that approach, everything changed. People started to really get involved and they were trying to introduce us to their friends and their family and saying, you've got to listen to this guy and this person's got a really interesting story. And suddenly all the buildings and the streets and the people in Brixton started to gain new meaning to us. People were giving us insights, painful, very personal insights into Brixton's past, telling us stories of love and music and enormous creativity, but also social division and discrimination. We knew we had an enormous responsibility to try and find a way to communicate these stories in a way that was really representative of those experiences. So we started trying out a few ideas, and we decided that perhaps a map might be a good idea, a map of Coldharbour Lane, so that we could place the stories in the local geography. And we started thinking of ways you could maybe scroll around and the stories could pop up for you, and you could take a journey through Coldharbour Lane, through people's experiences, the same way that Mike and I have done. So we thought also that it might be good to have an ability to theme the journey so that you could maybe, say for example, click music and then you can take a journey of all the stories relating to music. Similarly, if you wanted to pick a certain decade, you might be able to search through a certain decade so you could find out about a different decade. But we wanted to be able to give people a sense of what it looked like, so we started looking at ways we could use 360 video and planting the stories in there as well, so you could search that way, and then also an illustrated street view, so you could see what Brixton looked like in different decades, and the stories follow you around. So as you can see, we're right at the beginning of this whole process, and we really want to develop it further with the people who've contributed stories to us to make sure that it's representative of them. And we've got loads of ideas. We want to create a way that people can upload their own stories, so they're not reliant on me and Michael anymore, and it can become a democratic platform for self-expression. We also want to produce a street exhibition so that people can see these stories printed up on big billboards and they can interact with them physically whilst walking down Coldharbour Lane. And this is really important because we exist now, as these stories will, in a digital environment. And it's really easy to forget about the relevance of physical spaces and physical interactions. But it's these people, these places, like this rec centre, as you heard from Stedman earlier, and the streets that give those places meaning and give us feelings of home and community and belonging. We want to also make sure that when these stories are heard by people, people will really be able to benefit from them. So one of the main things we need to establish is that when people talk to us, they really know that this is going to be our approach. I was talking to Stedman, and he was saying to me that he felt the reason why I felt so comfortable settling in Brixton is because over the years, the people in Brixton have worked hard to break down cultural and racial barriers that exist between people. And that's a really important thing, I think, to communicate outside. And that's what the digital project allows us to do. It allows us to present these stories way outside of Brixton because the relevance of these stories expand way outside of here. These local stories start to fill in gaps in our collective understanding of what it means to live not just in South London, but in Britain as a whole. For example, how can we discuss social integration on a national level if we forget memories of colour bar and xenophobia that people in Brixton recall vividly from decades ago? How do we discuss the economic justifications for displacing people from their homes if we forget the relevance and the impact of community-based economic initiatives that have been set up in Brixton? For example, the partner schemes that people came together and brought with them to come together and lend one another money when they were being denied loans over and over again by the banks to get mortgages and set up homes. Or more recently, the Brixton Pound, set up to empower local businesses and local people with a local economy. I believe that Britain's history has been remembered very selectively, and it's given us a false sense of, or a superficial sense of where we're from and who we are. These local stories can give us that added context and that added meaning so that we can start to reflect and find ways so as to not fall into more defensive social structures. Our communities and our homes will continue to evolve rapidly, and it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It can be a really good thing as long as our voices are heard and those changes are representative of the people that will live them. I think looking back through Brixton's history, we see countless examples of when people have been able to collectivise, make their voices heard, and then actually influence the change that's happened. And that's what really makes community strong, I believe, when we're able to influence the changes that are taking place. So I invite everybody here when you leave today to just look around you and imagine what was here before you got here. Maybe go out, start talking to strangers, start establishing what home really means to you and listen to what it means to other people. When we're able to do this, when we're able to listen, sometimes it's not easy. You don't always agree with everybody. Sometimes you don't understand people's experiences because you haven't lived it yourself. But it's that ability to listen to experiences and memories that lie outside of our own that give us the potential to grow as a collective and influence the inevitable change that's coming. So when it happens in a more democratic way and with the benefit of our experience. Thank you so much.